Let's get together to co-create a breakthrough for freedom of energy, sustenance, healing, and regeneration of the human vessel. Welcome to Physique, the free energy special interest group where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Hi everyone. Welcome to Physics 91st meeting. This is the second session of our 91st meeting. This is Physics, the free energy special interest group where science meets spirituality. And here we welcome everyone who would love to forge through the furthest frontiers in their research work, developing their free energy devices as well as healing technologies. We are an open-minded group, so we don't judge, and you can talk about anything that helps us with the technology. Okay, so here we are seeing my PowerPoint presentation on the agenda of this meeting here. This is the second session, and we just had our first speaker, Sean Pikasik, talking about cymatics. And the next session, we're going to have David Schiermeyer talking about cymatics as well. And actually, they learned from each other and they developed the science. Sean started first, and David come in and got the interest, and then they then became some of the most popular cymatics technologies on social media, and it's so fascinating to watch their work. So as I had introduced Physique, we are a free energy special interest group where science meets spirituality. And Pontus, if you could scroll down to the agenda, then we can see very quickly. Yeah, we have Pontus Hattiger is our head of R&D, and then we have Dr. Fres Fresel, who's the chair of the R&D, and then we have James Ring, a co-chair with me as well in Physique, and we have started since about 5.5 years ago or so. So actually it's the 91st meeting, not the 90th agenda here. And the first session, as I said, we had Sean Pikasik doing an amazing presentation of the science and art of cymatics. And then the second session, we have a researcher at Sympathetic Vibratory Physics, David Schiermeyer, saying that is the evolution of consciousness that demonstrates the geometric pressure fluctuations. I will introduce him properly through his bio in a moment. And the third session, we're having galactic astrologist Graham Forsgard, who will reveal how astrogenetic galactic astrology uses the phi geometry that underlies our etheric DNA helix and molecule necessary to decode the oversoul Akashic records. He reads Starseed's Akashic records and guide them in the divine mission here. And then we're going to have the fourth session. If everyone can stay on, it's going to be very delightful, where we have a a discussion of a forum amongst ourselves and the speakers, so we can actually share our knowledge and whatever that comes to the fore. And then please pen down your diary, our 92nd Physics meeting on the 1st of September, year 2021, because this is the next meeting, 92nd meeting, is like a follow-up of the 91st meeting, because we're talking about water and its interaction with vibration frequencies in today's meeting. But next it will be discussed by Dr. Emoto's protege on the water crystals. You know, if you label a nice word, thank you, or you say arigato gozaimasu, thank you, and all that, and I love you, the water crystal will become very beautiful. So cymatics is really related. Okay, and then we're going to have a very famous Nobel Prize laureate scientist called Gerard Pollack, who will be talking about the fourth phase of water. So it's a very important meeting. Pen it down in your diary. Every first Wednesday of the month, we have our public meeting, and all are welcome. Okay, right. So thank you, Pontus. If you want to write to me, write to crystal@truevisionofpeace.com, and do go to our website, truevisionofpeace.com/physic.html, and then you will see join us and click on it, and then fill in the form, and you'll be in our database, and you will keep receiving our once a month newsletter, reports, and invitation to join our public meeting all in one. So you don't have to be like bombarded with emails from us. No, it's just once a month from us. Okay. If you don't like it, just delete it. That's fine. So, okay, right. I'm going to introduce, thank you, Pontus. Yeah, Pontus showed that very quickly, but you can freeze frame and read our website and my email address. So I'm going to introduce David now. Wow, sorry, David, we are a little bit behind, but we're fine. I think all of us are interested enough to stay on until we finish the fourth panel session, right? Fourth session. David Schiermeier says frequencies are only patterns to their own surroundings, just like us, because we are made of 74% of water in our human body. So it's very important that we study this, okay, from creative inventors like Sean, David, and Graham, and many others to follow, okay? So as beings, he said, we can only experience what our surroundings offer. What matters is how we use that experience. We tune into different channels, just like a mixing board, our minds separating current and frequencies. We can auto tune our mind by adjusting our tone, our thoughts, our action. We are the living experience of cymatics. We are the experience of living information. We are the experience of our surroundings, and our surroundings are experiencing through ourselves. How profound. Once we grasp this as a species, there will be a true evolution of being. Now, this spirit of the moment, encapsulated so clearly then in the sharings of creative inventor David Schiermeier, who is gaining a rapidly increasing group of avid followers, as Sean Pikasik does. When he's not juggling the demands of his day job and a growing family, David dedicates countless hours to sharing his numerous experiments with sound, frequency, and cymatics online. Right. So I think that's it without much ado. You read more about David's and Sean's background in our website, okay, because we don't have much time now. So over to you. I hand the microphone over to you, David, so you can share with us your science and creativity with cymatics now.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll start off just by, mostly for me, this was all not intended. It was something that happened. You know, I was going through a lot of situations, being an artist, a musician, then having a family. Then I got in, you know, years of, you know, just doing that. And I tended to veer away from my art and my music, and I started getting depressed. And then I started doing art and music again, thinking that would help me, and it didn't seem to help. And when I decided that, you know, things got really bad, I literally set out to build a frequency chamber in my backyard to kind of learn to something in the degree of like rewiring my brain, just because I felt like it's one thing to understand the mind, and it's one thing to understand things like depression and things that we go through on an everyday basis. But what we're really doing is we're allowing ourselves to tune things in that we're not quite understanding through language itself. In other words, how I see something and I determine what it is still just a frequency. Even though I define it, it doesn't necessarily mean that definition is what I humanistically define it as. And when I started doing cymatics, that was kind of an accident, in the sense that I needed to learn how frequencies behave. I needed to learn how magnetics behave. I needed to learn how plasma behaved and all kinds of stuff. And I went through the internet, I researched everything. Um, Only being like a musician and an artist, there's only so much I could have done. And that I did build electronics for playing music. So I had a slight electronics background, but really it was more or less my drive to change my experience, change my life. And in that, I set out to build the magnetic vortex frequency chamber. I studied a little bit about everything. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that there's too many different kinds of ideas out there, I guess, so to speak, in that sense. And when it came down to it, I had to do things myself. I had to learn from my own experience what things actually were. How does a magnet behave? How does a frequency behave? How do these things behave and what do they do? How do they affect me? And so I could build something that would be able to be controlled. And literally, I kind of got ahead of myself. I built the chamber in my backyard. I started doing it and realized quickly how expensive it would be and how over my head it was, really, because you're not going to just throw something together without understanding materials and stuff. So I had to go back to like William Reich's work, where he studied materials and electrons, how they pass through each other, how atmospheric energy and electrons are all around us all the time, and how we are magnetic vortexes ourselves, can be pulling in these magnetic fields and electrons. We can charge our body. We can do a lot with understanding our simple surroundings and our behaviors of those surroundings. And so when I got into cymatics, it just kind of was a slow thing. Nobody really explained it. Sean was pretty much the only one that helped me out and gave me the basic information of how it worked. And then from there, I kind of just did my own thing and developed my own understanding, because I felt like if I was going to do something, I need to have the same understanding as an inventor or somebody that didn't have the understanding in the beginning. This way you can develop a true understanding by observation. Because to me, ancient people learned from observation. They observed Earth and the space for thousands of years and generations before they actually established pretty much technology or information that can be gathered in that way. So, and that I found was the interesting part of the connection between frequencies and vibrations, our surroundings, us, the universe. We define things, but things aren't technically defined. Nature doesn't contemplate. Nature has a purpose, not so much as a meaning. We tend to look for meaning, and we outlook the actual purpose of things. And when we place the purpose into things, we actually achieve it, because we're doing things to have actions and behaviors that place that into reality. Reality is only reality because we imagined it first. We created it through the mind's eye, and then we created it into a form of material, and nature itself we used as its information of technology, how it functions, and then how we place that function onto things, even ourselves. So for me, it really boiled down to understanding these things, understanding function and the reality of how things actually worked. When I first got into cymatics, it was I have understanding only because I just kicked my camera. One thing with cymatics is that you have to be pretty patient with it, and it's not one of those things that you can just rush into and understand quite quickly in that sense. It really does boil down to that over time you're learning something like a job and work or any type of skill. And the more you do it, the more you realize how it works and how good things can relate to that to you. So for me, I looked at this when you're doing cymatics, a lot of people, you can see my light is off just a tiny bit there, and I'll adjust that by moving my tripod or my whole setup here, getting that center, because that's the most important part to all this, is having your light centered, being able to read the pathways of geometry. At first, I just thought, oh, this is so amazing. This geometry is coming out of these things. And for a long time, I didn't really understand why. And then I started placing particles in water and started looking a little bit deeper into the function of how this actually worked inside of a containment. And the more I understood that these frequencies were changing and changing their behaviors and their sizes and everything, like in cymatics, a lot of things won't be shown. You'll just see a lot of things with a big speaker, a big pan of water, and that's what I tried. And unfortunately, frequencies don't work like that. They actually get smaller and smaller as they get higher. So as we're dealing with more like 1 hertz through your basic 40 hertz, which are like all the brain frequencies and things that we actually think about and use on a daily basis without even understanding that we're using them. And when we're using things that we don't understand, that's kind of how they get taken advantage and stuff, by not understanding what we're actually thinking and what we're doing. So when I started looking at this, I just was seeing the outside of this, the light reflecting off the water. But if I added a filter, I could see dimensions, and I could see that there were much more details to these lines. And then I started realizing there are no lines in this. A line is an apex to the curve itself, in that sense that now if I start to look at frequencies and say this is current, and we use frequencies and change them through capacitors, resistors, and different types of electronics. The more I looked at this, I'm like, we are wasting a lot of potential energy and a lot of technology because we are doing everything linear. We have point A to point B where the electricity comes into the machine and it does all the functions it wants to do by changing it all to low voltage and low frequencies. And the interesting part is that we're using a lot of things like crystals and things that are, honestly, everything is nature and technology. We just kind of forget that. Even function itself is from nature. Everything we do, everything we think about, everything we can create, everything, any imaginative possibility, nature has that there for us to, kind of absorb. I don't like to think that we're taking things from nature. I like to think that we are absorbing things from nature, and we are transforming it into a physical reality. And for me, cymatics became a physical reality when I started using magnetics and plasma and understanding electrons in the air, how they can be collected with static resonance. And when you use frequencies with plasma, you can transform the plasma fields over each other. Instead of just using one plasma field, you use 2 plasma fields and connect them together with audio frequencies through kind of feedback resonance. And so what you're doing is you're collecting the sound waves through a coil, like a microphone, then you're sending that back into another coil, like a speaker. And then basically that resonance of the frequencies can allow plasma to transform itself and collectively become much more powerful and stronger rotations. Plasma is one of those things that's just kind of an exploding thing. It's not that controllable. And that's because there's so much electrons around our atmosphere that we're also forgetting that everything that we have around us is our atmosphere keeping us here. Right? It's not gravity to me. Gravity to me is just falling. What keeps us here is atmospheric pressures of level of water. We live in water. Water is on this planet. We are water, but more importantly, air is water. We are different levels of water all the way into the universe. Just because the universe we think is a vacuum is not technically a vacuum. It's extremely pressurized by extreme temperatures of cold, extreme temperatures of heat, radiation, magnetics, static resonance. These are like the electric universe things, you know, that can bind things together. And like I was talking about with frequencies, they bind together with the plasma fields. This is how they can collect and create something like a star, something like a sun and planets and things, because we have rotational values. We have the surroundings of pressure that allow cold and hot to become a flow, just like they do here on this planet. You know, we have temperature changing and flowing structures of the wind and everything. And when I started researching about cymatics, I wanted to see it dimensionally. That's when I started doing bubbles and using bubbles. Let me see if I could share my screen. And can you guys see the screen? Or does it just go to a
we have right now the purple screen, and it's lovely. It's while you've been talking. Go ahead and try the next one.
Let's see. All right, there. And let's see. So here we have, I don't know if you guys can see this one, can you?
You may want to go to full screen.
Or how to
just expand to full screen on your desktop.
It's, I'm kind of new at this Zoom stuff here. Enter full screen.
There you go. Very good.
All right. So which image are you guys seeing? Still the cymatics?
No, it's a circle with a bright white circle, and then a purple ring around it, and then blue fiery rings beyond that.
This is a Tesla coil spinning a wire, and it's just I'm not sure why it's not playing correctly.
When you share screen, you have to click a little box that optimize or share sound with the.
Oh, these videos don't have sound.
Okay.
Well, I use a lot of I use my like on this camera right now, I'm using to film the cymatics, or even on this video right here, I'm using a high speed camera. And when you look at how these rotational fields work, a lot of them form toruses, spheres, and how it works is that we can't see this if I were to just film this or show people this, but if I flick it, the plasma field, or I move it, it will create the rotational field still in a circular form, but then creates a lot of, you know, toruses and stuff like that. So a lot of the compression of space and, you know, different types of energy that we're dealing with in space and here, even on this planet. I can't get out of this though. How do I get out of this? Let's find it.
You'll need to minimize your screen that you're visualizing or hit stop share.
Okay, let's just do that and go back to this. And now is it back on my cymatics thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so what I found was that in the bubbles and in plasma and in cymatics in these dishes and these containments are these rotational values. These rotational values kind of all are determined not just by the frequency, but by the shape. Obviously, if I change the pan size or I change the characteristics of it, it changes the image completely. So a lot of mistheory about this frequency does this is what it looks like. That's can't really be determined in mapping that correctly, because it's almost an infinite amount of information that you can collect just with one frequency, let alone trying to mix frequencies like the universe has. You know, you're talking about billions of frequencies intertwining with each other over eons. In that sense, there's a functional whole computer already built. The computer is a living information, you know, it's like a living form of everything that's been collected. Water is collected, all of it, in my mind. Water's collected all the information of all functions and values. And as it interacts with everything, it allows pressure, it allows containment, it allows matter to become actual matter itself in a lot of ways, because it's creating a lot of the fields that allow things to function in the first place. Water is one of these things that has weight to it and a lot of different importance in the sense of how it reacts to frequencies in general. And to me, everything is frequencies, you know, like light is a frequency, my voice, my thoughts, everything. There is just not one thing that is not a frequency. And when I just look at that and I stop looking at everything in the way I thought about things, stop looking at myself, I stopped looking at self-identity, because honestly, everything that I was thinking was always just a judgment of my identity, of who I was and what I wanted to do. I wanted to build this frequency chamber. I wanted to not be depressed. And yet I'm so analytical and I'm so, you know, like on myself all the time. Thinking about and understanding depression only made me more depressed. So it didn't help me to get out of it by understanding it. It was like I had to understand it. And that was the thing with cymatics. It was like the more I tried to understand it, the more I kind of didn't understand it. And the more I let go and acted like it was a language, and acted like every time it does something or functions or behaves a certain way, then that's something within me changing and behaving very much similar. Like I have a lot of relationship to the way things work in a pan of water, is because these things are just opposing each other by being its own identity. So it's a circle at first. We turn it down, we just have a circle. And as we amplify it, we're going to start to see how these behaviors start to jump over each other. These are things like within ourselves. We do this with our mind. We think about things and we place these frequencies all on top of each other by thinking about them just in general. And it gets a point to where you start to think about things so much that you almost overwhelm yourself. But then you can bring yourself back down and say, you know what, it's not worth getting all hyper about or getting all, you know, psychological with it. And then you can kind of balance yourself out the same exact way. You can take the idea the same way. And when I started looking at them, I started seeing these things don't want to always work. Not every single frequency wants to make a star. Not every single frequency wants to make anything sometimes. It depends on what size and the ratios and the fluid and everything. Everything matters. This is why I've learned to develop my own kits where the pans all change. You take them and you change them. I can take this one off and I can change it to another pan as I go higher. And this right here we've been looking at is 27 hertz. So this is an octave of 432. When I started looking at different things, everybody wanted to see all the sacred geometry numbers. Everybody wanted to be able to map out something that had some relevance to it, to some ancient history. But the more I dealt with this, the more I just started seeing that there's not a lot of connections, and the real connection was people themselves. How we gather that information, just like a belief or a religion, and we amplify it that way. We're using it, and we go to these meetings and congregations and different things that all these like-minded people will share the same idea. That's a powerful energy right there. And it can be very overwhelming to somebody to go into those places and maybe not understand it. And they'll be totally overwhelmed and be like, oh man, I kind of not fitting in. I don't understand what all these people are thinking and doing, but yet I feel like I want to be here. I feel comfortable with this. And maybe by the end of that event and stuff, they have fully embraced that event or that show, that, you know, anything, art, music, it all doing the same process to us. We are an emotional species. We have so much feelings of everything that we touch and experience that we can't always give words to describe them. And this is where I said this cymatic stuff is its own language. It's not words. I can't define this into a language. I can only define this as behaviors, as function. And when I started doing that, it was like, this is how I behave. This is how I act. If I do something and things come into my life and I don't like it, why? Why do I not like it? Why does that oppose me? Really, my job as a human would be more that I need to understand that opposingness, work with that opposingness, and be able to embrace it into something new. That's what cymatics does. These things are opposing each other. These fields are all opposing each other. And when you take a little bit of things and you start to understand all these different rotational values of different frequencies and stuff. Now this is mica powder in here. I don't know if you guys can kind of see it or not, but I'm going to amplify this a little bit more to show.
Yes, we can see it.
So on higher frequencies, you're going to see a lot more rotation because this is a lower frequency at 27 hertz. Things are going to travel a little bit slow, but they're all following the path of geometry. When I started looking at these, I wasn't just seeing the path of geometry. I was seeing the vortexes inside of it that you guys can't see in film. It would be more like you would actually have to see things on a very super detailed level that my cameras don't always get, but you can see with your eyes. These things can kind of, this is where cymatics, you know, isn't really geometry anymore. This is how things flow and cycle within that cosmic pressure. You know, like if this was a larger scale and outer pressures were holding those pressures in place, this is exactly how those rotational fields work to create that. Our wind and our atmosphere all create things like this. That's why we have key vortex points in the earth with significant energy fields. If we understand the weather patterns and we understand the way energy is flowing around them, because that's where the most electrons are traveling, you can really start to gauge how Earth itself can be healed and heal us. To me, if we focus more on understanding energy and understanding its true values of all its dimensional values. It's not just something that is a linear thing, you know, like energy, current. We use these things on a daily basis. Everything is invoked in our attitude, our behaviors. If I started yelling and screaming, this would make people feel uncomfortable. These are different frequencies that are affecting us, you know, like if I play loud music, maybe I don't like it, but somebody else does. So it's not to say that the frequencies are doing so much to people as much as people are doing it to themselves, as I realized. These things are just information. These things are just forms of connection to take that observation and apply those observations to things like technology, like ourselves. Because to me, we are technology. We are a natural form of technology. We are absorbing our surroundings, and we convert that into ideas and the imagination into physics and material. We come up with innovative ways to do things and create things, and it never has to end. We only are limiting ourselves when we start to think we understand it. Like, the more I tried to understand this, I felt like I was limiting myself to actually understanding it. And every time I built a project and I said, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make this do this, but that didn't work. That didn't work for me. Things don't work that way for me. I'm very intuitive. I don't like this whole thing. I didn't prepare because I don't like setting things up in the sense that you go out and you have this plan and you do it and maybe it doesn't work and you feel disappointed. To me, there is no failure. There is no disappointment. There always is the achievement of understanding something because of that failure, because of that disappointment. Every time I built something and it didn't work, I learned more from it not working than I would if I went out there and built it and it did work and I didn't know why. Why did that work? You know, I didn't understand why something worked. If it worked, I didn't care because it worked. In that sense, when things didn't work for me, that's when I had to actually understand it. That's when I had to break it down, just like cymatics. Every single detail, every single thing with the light, with the colors, with height. If the light is too far away, you'll get more detailed line imagery with more of the X-ray looking kind of images. The closer the light is, the more fatter and wider everything will look because we're dealing with waves. And as these frequencies get higher, they're just compressing themselves. So once we get up to like 100 hertz, frequencies start compressing themselves deeply, you know, and we will have to change different things. Like, so if we start to look at a little tiny cap of water here, this is about 3/4 of an inch. And we go to more like 54 hertz, which is also a frequency octave of 432. And let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. Okay. I use a lot of microscope cameras because I found that they can pick up the images much better. Regular cameras, not so much, like they don't tend to pick up the images that good. A lot of problems with the frames per second in frequencies. So in other words, every time we have a frame per second, a frequency can alter that frame per second and change the way that image is looking. Like you see the image right now, it's moving around. Technically, it's not moving. Technically, that's the frames per second moving. And we're like, you know, like our eyes only work at 25 frames a second. So it gets to the point where if you really want to see things, you gotta get like a high-speed camera and kind of really start adjusting everything. And I started thinking like that first image, six-sided image would repeat itself again because this is an octave. So you'd think octaves repeat themselves. They sound the same when we listen to them, but they don't look the same when we change them. This one has 8 sides now. And, we only went up 1 octave to 54 hertz. If I were to put 54 hertz in the last pan, it would look like a more scattered, jumbled fractal image. And that's because the compression is allowing the frequencies to double itself over the space it has. This is why you have to compress it down. So if we wanted to use the functional value, let's say for current and different types of technology, we may think that we need resistors and capacitors to do things. But technically, if we used all the value of that holographically, and we use light sensors, and we use more like fiber optics and sensing, like how lenses work in computers, you could start to read 3-dimensional current through color, spectrum, and different values of frequency, especially like the bubbles, where we have a multiple dimensional kind of structure instead of the flat image now. And when we start to understand that if we were to take a multiple dimensional image and use sensors like optical lenses and things to capture those colors, because on a bubble, the frequency affects the shape of the bubble and changes the color. And the color changes because the layer of the bubble becomes thinner. And it looks a little blurry. So sorry about that, guys. Now I can see my work here. I can adjust this. So yeah, it's really hard to get some of this stuff really perfectly adjusted. I can see why like a lot of people have had a hard time with cymatics, trying to figure it out. I mean, quite honestly, it took me a couple years to actually figure out how it worked and why it did what it did. I mean, in that process, I became the magnetic vortex frequency chamber. I felt like I didn't need to build it anymore. And I started to understand things outside myself. I no longer think that I'm David, and I think from this personal point of view, because when I do, I feel like that's not real. Like I'm almost like this mold of something that was there that was programmed to be that way. And when I start to just look at frequencies and feel my body, my surroundings, and all the vibrations of color and everything, sound and everything, just silence is a frequency, and it feels so warming and calm. And these are the things that, like I started to just say, hey, my emotions aren't so emotional anymore. They aren't sadness and happiness, even though I feel them. Those are what I'm feeling vibrationally. I don't have to define them that way, in that sense, to give them an excuse. I don't have to give them a point of view, because those point of views will only limit my feelings. They only limit my point that I can grow from. And when I started letting a lot of things go, it's like I live in Los Angeles. And it's hard to drive out here. It's hard to do anything out here without having a lot of people that are just so self-absorbed. And it's a very difficult task to weed your way through thousands and thousands of people that don't care about anything but themselves. And it used to bother me a lot, because it's like, I want to help people. I want those people to help people. And I want it to be a growing thing that everyone can share. But how do you help someone that doesn't want to be helped? When I lived in downtown, I tried to help homeless people, and They didn't want to be helped. You know, they want to live their life the way they do. And it's like, you can't force things on people, but you know, we have a society now, we have things now in system and order. How do we change everything in the world to be a better place? How do we become better people? And the only way I can see it is if we stop looking at ourselves so much as individuals, so much as our self. Self is ego. Ego only was created because we created self-identity. If we never created self-identity, we would be only sharing what we all share as a species. And when species share things to each other, and when we gather up all the human beings, if we're just human beings, well, we can get a lot done because we're the ones doing it. We could change the whole planet tomorrow if we wanted to. We have all the technology now. We're being held back by everything in our minds. We're being held back by our emotions, our actions, and our behaviors. This is a connection between this and the universe. The universe is nothing but behaviors and actions. To me, consciousness isn't what we think. Consciousness is real. It's a form of function. It's a behavior of matter itself. Consciousness is when you look at it through species and cells or anything, these things all communicate by their vibrational frequencies. They all communicate that way. Everything does. Only humans are the ones that try to establish a form of information on top of that level to kind of gather it and say we understand it. But are we really understanding it? That's my issue with everything. We're always saying we understand something, and science is always claiming to have the new science or the new way to do something. And yet 20 years from now, we'll have a completely different science. We'll have a completely different form of technology. Why do we keep saying something is something when something isn't? This is just a level. This is just an experience. This is just something right now. Forever, we are always in the experiences of everything. We can take from the future and bring it into the present. We could take from the past and put it in the present. Time is not something stopping us from changing life or the world or each other. It isn't that. It's our inability to see each other through each other. You know, a lot of people want that and we all care about it, but how do we achieve that? You know? And cymatics taught me to stop thinking so much about me, what I want to feel, or what I want to experience. And it started giving me an opportunity to understand something like how I understood music. When I wrote a song and I played music, I didn't think about the music. I just played it. And then my friend would play, and then the other guy would play. And next thing you know, we have a whole entire song. And then next thing you know, we have an album and a record, and you're doing it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with an artist. Artists will see things in their mind and they'll put that out onto a canvas and paper or wherever they're even physical things. And it's their expression. And people go up to it and they look at it and they feel it and they understand it. They don't always have to be told what it is. When I do like my cymatics, people want me to tell them what it is. And it's art in that sense, but it's science. It's my life. It's so much more than all things because it brings it all together. You know, it brought it all together for me personally. And right. I stopped.
Sorry, I need to stop you now because time's running out. We're going to continue with our panel session after Graham has spoken, okay?
No problem.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, I think I have to turn it over to Fresh, Pontus, and James. If you got anything that you want to co-chair with me on this session before we adjourn it to the third session with Graham.
I will pass the floor to Pontus next because I took the last guest we had pretty heavy on questions. So Pontus, floor is yours.
Yes, David. When you run or what it's called octaves of the semantic, the frequencies. How does it make the same pattern, or does it make a quite different pattern?
No, it would make a quite different pattern. That's what I was saying. Like earlier, we were
Okay.
looking at 27 hertz, and
Yep.
then we were looking at 54 hertz, which was the octave of 432 too. And it was a 8 figure. Here we have 54, 27 only had 6. If I jump up to 108, 108 right here. And you're going to start seeing different kinds of things where the water won't be able to show you a direct pattern. Technically, the containment is either too big or too small. And I'll usually switch to a really tiny containments. Like this is only a 1/4 inch right here.
Oh,
And because the frequency is such a tiny frequency in that sense, you're really gonna see that water behaves more like the infinity. Like it really does, it does these weird things where it's mostly like showing you an infinity symbol, or like a torus that is bifolded itself. You kind of see it right there.
mhm.
A little bit. Let's see if I can turn down the lighting. It's very hard to see these things because they just get so tiny. And as if I were to go back up to like, and get the correct amount of water matters, because maybe the fluid in here needs a little bit more to behave. And this is the kind of thing that told me that there's no map I can make, even though we're going to be building AI software right now to collect the information and allow the AI software to kind of gather information from the images themselves. And then you see a lot of imagery will be this cross symbol, and a lot of cymatics, a lot of all the first and the very beginning functions are all this right here. Everything comes from this cross symbol. And I've shown it before in a lot of videos, mostly in bubbles, because bubbles will repeat this cross symbol no matter what frequency I use. It just has a different behavior on it. I don't think my bubble rig right now will work, but we'll put it on here. And a lot of these are going to show always the same function right there. And basically you're looking at like how something's spinning around, how something kind of folds on top of each other and starts to collapse. And that's the main thing. I started seeing that in the very center of cymatics, in the very center of bubbles. You see these things that smash into each other. And so the torus is really a cross symbol. It's like 4 spheres on top of each other, creating a torus. We think of a torus as a donut shape.
Yeah.
But technically all matter, all function comes from the torus, but the torus is really 4 spheres, 2 spheres to start off with, like a duality, 2 opposing fields. They smash into each other and duplicate each other and basically just do what cells do. So they copy each other, and then now you have 4 spheres that are created into the perfect torus. This little bubble attachment is not the right one to actually show what I'm talking about, but I can change the frequency to a lower frequency, and it should show some little bits of that. Sometimes,
David,
yeah.
For clarification for our viewing audience, when you say bubbles, are you talking soap bubbles, or are you talking about
Yeah.
a plasma bubble?
This is a bubble right here. what I'm showing you is a bubble. This is too close up though. I'm sorry about this. I gotta just back this up a little.
So a bubble is three-dimensional.
Yeah, so this is a flat bubble, like as if you were to put a bubble on a ring and blow on a bubble.
Mhm.
So I have a 4-inch, this is probably a 3-inch bubble. I usually like to use rings that are about 5 to 6 inches. They show better geometry. A bubble is a lot harder to show, like how cymatics works, because it doesn't act the same. It does a lot of different kinds of things where the function isn't always easy to show people how it actually even works. As the frequencies get lower, they get so much bigger. Maybe if I go way high, this ring might work, because I use this ring for music, and music is very high frequencies. Much harder to show people music and cymatics or a bubble or any of that kind of stuff. So I have 2 frequencies here playing at the same time. That's why it's doing that. So it'll start to do the cross symbol first. And you can kind of see how it will, like, these things will like smash into each other. Pretty interesting when you can get it to work. Not every frequency works on a bubble like cymatics. So it's much more difficult to use them, and they pop a lot. So, but I've developed a good formula for making bubbles that don't pop. So I can work with a bubble for like up to about an hour. Some I've left alone, like putting them like inside of things, like a crystal I left in a bubble, and the crystal's vibrations sent all the colors away completely, because it's such a high frequency, and higher frequencies will make all the colors go away in a bubble. So I started putting things into the bubbles, like just setting them there, not using them on speakers like I'm doing now. And the more I started doing that, the more I started being able to, see how things were affecting, because bubbles are so sensitive. This is just the membrane of the bubble. You guys aren't seeing the outer structure, that all the oils and stuff that would look like, like Jupiter or something, those spin around much differently than this. That takes a whole different lighting technique that I have at my house, and it's not here. I'm at my office right now. But when these start to, basically this is what bubbles are, the ones that show me how frequencies were getting smaller and smaller and smaller, because they just performed the same exact way. They didn't really change. They started only changing when I started doing things and controlling the frequencies myself. When I started changing the frequencies and doing certain things to them, then I can kind of control this, and changing the size ratios, because bubbles need a bigger surface. Like as I said, this is a 3-inch ring meant for music, and it's not going to perform like how a 5-inch ring is going to perform, and can kind of, I know what I'm looking at, so I can see things compressing and smashing down as I'm going higher here.
How much higher have you gone? What frequency?
Well, once I start to get over like 300 or 400 hertz, I have to switch to like my oscilloscopes that I build. And those you can see only toruses and their rotational values. And that's kind of like, you know, go all the way up to 2000 hertz, you know,
Wow.
3000 hertz. And what you're looking at that point is circles on top of each other, how they act. But cymatics has shown me a lot of how circles act and how they perform. So in that sense, I can look at a torus and look at the functional values of those toruses and kind of take away from those. See, here's the symbol right here.
David, would the bubble on the ring be more of a cross section of what you're seeing in the field, or whereas your dish is more of a volume of liquid? The
Yeah,
bubble
so
becomes more of a
this
cross-
would be a this is a, let me see if I can just change my view here for you guys. So my setup here, I build these, and you can see there's the light up here, mixing board, just a simple speaker, which can't really see the ring on there. There you go. So that's the ring right there. Normally I'd like to use like a 5-inch ring or 6-inch ring. And I've recently bought a 3D printer. So I started printing my own parts and different kinds of accessories for doing this kind of stuff, because it does make a difference to change different things. But I do change the ring to a square, to a triangle. I have videos of hexagons here. Here's one with a hexagon. The flat bubble. So this would be a hexagon shape, and I blew the bubble up as a sphere. And can you guys see that?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, let me do this thing real fast. Did that work?
Wow, that is
beautiful. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
So that would be a 5-sided shape. And as I start to do this, that bubble will pop, and and then it'll turn flat. So if I fast forward this probably a little bit, and see, once again, we're just looking at the X pattern here. Once again, that to me, that's a real true torus. It's really how it works, how things start to collapse on each other, and how function starts to disperse itself into other functional kinds of ways. So you could see a torus being kind of on the top of a bubble. You can see toruses pretty easy. So that it's really interesting because you can't get these all the time. This is very difficult to get a perfect torus like that on a bubble. The frames per second mess with it a lot. This is extremely small. That shape that I'm using down there is like about, like a 6 to 8 inch polygon. And I'm using a rounded bubble on top of it. And in that sense, I'm only seeing probably something right there is probably 1 or 2 inches. So you have this giant bubble with just only a 1 or 2 inch image that you can actually see cool stuff like this.
Does that image appear above, like it looks like it's floating above it, or is it inside the bubble?
No, it's on the surface of the bubble.
Okay.
So that's the interesting part, that it looks more dimensional because things are moving up and down, and the camera angle is slightly to the side instead of directly over it. So you're looking at the bubble moving up and down. Remember how I showed you guys the plasma earlier was a circle, and if I flicked it, it would become a torus.
Yeah.
This is the same principle that something is rounded circularly and then becoming a torus because it's being pushed up and down and spread out. So matter, like space and stuff to me is an expansion of this. Like everything is being pulled and pushed together and by forces themselves.
So the last few frames, is that the flat bubble across the hexagon shape?
Let's do this one real fast. This would be what that is, a flat bubble right there on this shape right here.
The last video clip that you were showing, it's so colorful. I mean, I'm trying to imagine how you place the color filters.
The colors
3D
change automatically due to the like kinds of, you can see that's the kind of light I'm using. I'm using a microscope light and a ring light together. And so white light will create images like this, but white light that is diffused because I didn't have the filter on the light and it was just showing the LEDs. This is what you get, is the line work from the LEDs.
Okay.
If I put a filter over it, then we get more like, where the white filter displaces the colors like a prism. And so you're seeing right now just white light. The different colors is from the bubble's shape being bent. So thinner areas will be one color and thicker areas will be a different color. This is where I was talking about how you can do holographic technology in the sense of using spectrum with optic lenses now. Like if we had layered glass and these were very thin layers of glass with an image like this in there, each layer can pull a spectrum and each optic lens can absorb that current's energy from that layer. And not just that, you'll see the different rotational values, you see the vortexes at the top, but the surface itself has hundreds of spinning things all over it. You can't see in this lighting. I don't know if I have another one with the other kinds of lighting. This is a flat bubble with, once again, the ring showing some of the surface movement there. As I go higher, you see the X is getting smaller and there's more rings being produced. Now I'm going higher here and I turn up the audio. You'll hear the audio. And as I get higher, everything's just shrinking. There's more rings now. There's more, everything's being compressed on top of each other. That vortex in the center is really pushing itself outwards. It's repeating itself, just like cellular reproduction. Sound is like exactly like that. And I'm convinced that it's how we were created. Like our cells were created because frequencies compressed themselves on top of each other and formed into perfect structures of cellular structure. I mean, you can see them here just forming this structure. Other things, like as you start to look at the different types of things that happen inside the bubble, I don't know what that is. But all these colors you see are from the bubble itself. These are different layers and different depths of thickness. And these are what gave me the idea, because solar panels have been converted with optic lenses to get more energy out of them by having a little tiny clear dome placed over the cell. That way, everywhere the sun travels, the optic light will always be hitting it no matter where it is. It bends the light. And it converts it a little bit more into a compressed energy, allowing those cells to create more solar energy. As things really work like this, I started seeing all that kind of function in the bubbles. They're absolutely amazing. I barely have been working with them for maybe like 2 years, and I'm still every single time learning so much about how function itself works, how something was created.
We are spellbound. It's like watching a cosmic dance of sound, music, colors.
I mean, to
light.
me, this is like how the universe was formed. I mean, you have something that created these pressure points in the center, and then they literally compress themselves into such energy that a star can be formed and be held there by pressure and temperatures that are being regulated. It's just like doing a star in a jar is only really happening because the sonic waves inside of the jar are acting like that, this center point. They compress themselves around a circular vessel, and then they smash into this perfect center point. And then that energy is so powerful that it creates plasma. And that little tiny atomic energy is what allows the same exact thing to duplicate itself larger and larger and larger. And that's how we have our solar system. We have stars and we have planetary alignment and everything. They all are working off of each other for eons.
David, I'm going to switch over to James Rink. I think he's got some questions for you.
Okay, no problem.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, first question is, do you think octaves are holographic in nature?
I think so. I think that's why you have different size ratios of different things, you know. I think octaves affect a lot of that the fact of how something is behaving, you know. So if it's affecting something's behavior, then it has to affect the things around the different species of something. Maybe it could be the same species of insect or flower or plant, and maybe just an octave of a difference is like a cellular change in the DNA that allows it to be slightly different from the other one. But yet they are the same, like we are.
Would that also include, like, say, wavelengths of light as well?
Light's a funny thing to me personally. We observe it here on this planet differently than actually how it functions. To me, light doesn't travel. Light is already there. And what we're seeing is the movement of ourselves. Everything kind of, to me, because everything is seen through a frames per second, it deceives the way things actually work. In function, things don't always move around in the sense that we actually experience. Like, you think a black hole might be sucking in matter, but perhaps black holes, like I've shown in a bubble, are dispersing matter so drastically. You see these black points in the parts of the bubble. No light travels into those black points because the frequencies throw them off so powerfully. No light can travel there. It's the same principle as how we're looking at a black hole. No light can travel there because the frequencies are that powerful at those points that it's dispersed all forms of energy and matter in there. The bubble actually is still in these black points. There's still a membrane there, but you can't see light reflecting off of it because the matter is not there to reflect off of, just like a black hole. In that sense, we're seeing everything from a reflective point of view, and we're not understanding that things are actually not traveling. Like, light doesn't actually travel. It's more of a surroundings. It's here. It's everywhere already. And what we're experiencing is the earth is moving, things are moving, we are moving, our eyes are moving, our minds are moving. That is the illusion of how we break things down and separated them. But technically, in function, there's not a lot of separation. There's a duality of something working together, and then it repeats itself just like cellularly.
Dave,
Function is
how
no
many-
different.
How many different colors did you put in a filter to come up with such amazing, spectacular results?
This is no filter. This is no colors. I didn't do this. The bubble did.
Wow.
The bubble reflects like a prism because it changes size of the bubble's film. The membrane itself is being manipulated so drastically that thinner layers become black and transparent.
Gosh, this
Thicker
is
areas
really
become
magic.
different colors. There's a study on bubbles that
Mhm.
you guys can look up if you want. It shows how the spectrum of the color of the bubble is manipulated and changed by its thinness. So every time they did these studies where they stretched and thinned out the bubble, they can make different colors of the layers of the bubble being thinner and thicker. I haven't really
Would you
quite
be able
figured
to
it out.
put a link there for us to study, David? The bubble
I've been looking
design.
for it, and someone from a bubble webpage, like
Uh-huh.
that they do bubbles.
Yeah.
He was the one that was explaining it to me, but I've been trying to find that a good solid link on it. I've read some things on it, but I
Mhm.
haven't found any scientific forms or information. But I know it's out there because I also have another bubble research paper that was strictly on studying the density of the membranes and
Oh.
different fluid values that you can make a bubble thicker or thinner.
Wow. You know, you can make quite a fair bit of money by freeze framing some of this and make steels out of it, and like modern art pieces that
Yeah,
you could
I do
sell.
have,
It will grace a lot of nice, beautiful modern living rooms.
I do have
Modern
a lot
art.
of my stuff is on a website that creates my images into posters or bedding or tables or whatever
Wonderful.
you want. They'll put the images on it.
Mhm.
Um,
The same goes
I-
with Sean, of course, the two of you
yeah,
can.
I tend to not. I tend to like want to. Lately, been taking more of my images and I'll be making NFTs, which
Mhm.
are digital copyrights, basically.
Mhm.
And once you
Mhm.
sell an NFT, you get a copyright for it, and then you get royalties based on how much you sold that for, they sell it for. So if someone sold my art and to somebody else, I still get a royalty off of it. That's how
wonderful.
NFTs work. But
Right.
my NFTs
As
are
much
gonna
as
be,
we like to feast our eyes on more and more of these beautiful masterpieces, we can't because time's running on a bit. We
no
have 4
problem.
sessions today.
I appreciate you guys giving me the time to rant about my life. I know that I don't have a lot of scientific information,
Uh-huh.
quite honestly, and I don't have a lot of terminology to give people. My
Mhm.
experiences are more personal and more how
Mhm.
I went from being a complete skeptic of everything
Mhm.
to understanding a lot about the skeptic. Being a skeptic was just self, it was me. Function taught me a lot more about me than anything. So
But you
I
did.
I can give things to people that people can look at and see function. I know
Mhm.
that they can observe it and it will expand their mind to question things.
Mhm.
And once you start questioning things and asking yourself things, that's when you really become in tune with yourself and understanding these things together. It's how we bind a lot of technology and ourselves together.
Sure. Thank you. We really enjoyed the cosmic dance of nature that you demonstrated. It's really so beautiful and inspiring. Thank you. James, I suppose we can move on now to the next session because Graham Foskett has been waiting for a long time now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was supposed to be done at 1:30.
Yeah. Oh, I know we started late as well, and it added up. All right. So, Fres, you okay? Yeah, Pontus, shall we then? There being no other business now, this session, the second session of the 91st Physics meeting is now adjourned to the third session, where Graham Foskett will be talking about galactic astrology. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. That is so beautiful. We are
Thank you.
all mesmerized. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming to speak here.
Thank you so much, David.